Talofa lava, malama lele, whakalofa lahi atu, taloha nidi, kia ora tātou, and greetings. I'm Rod Oram, and it's my great pleasure to be here. And it's been a fabulous morning, so this is now going to be very brief. I won't even introduce them, because we've had 4 speakers you've got to know very well. And we're just going to take a tiny bit of time to ask them 2 or 3 questions before we have lunch, rather than have a discussion. So any takers out there, you don't have a microphone because we've just got the 2. They're sharing one, I've got another. Just, Robert, right here, just stand up and sing out, well not, or talk out.
William, what's the Labor Party policy about preparing scenarios, not just for the Pacific, but how New Zealand should adapt to the changes that are coming?
Yeah, so we haven't released anything yet. We're working on it, but we are taking it quite seriously. So there's 2 of us. So you've got Dr. Megan Woods, who's working for New Zealand in terms of this, and I'm focusing on the Pacific. There is a real need for a plan, and part of the plan is the transitioning of our use of fossil fuel usage into the kinds of industries that the professors are talking about. There is also a need for us to have an independent authority to sort of look at what we're doing and keeping track of that. And so it's more ambitious than what the government's released, and we're trying to put pressure on the government to look harder at the pledges that we're making to the Paris meeting. But from this experience in the Pacific, I feel a sense of urgency. Yes, we're talking about 2050, 2070, 2100, but as you get older, well, some of us, not me, as you get older, things speed up. And part of my thinking is that those things that I've shared in that slide, there is a need for a relocation plan, but it's a plan that has to be worked in with the Pacific countries identified, as well as with support of some of our regional partners. In 2014, the policy that we had was a review of our Pacific Access Quota. It's about establishing and relooking at the outstanding issues, particularly the overstay sector. My colleagues are now more sympathetic about that. We need to look at Tiumalu and Kiribati with humanitarian eyes. So, as I said, we haven't released it, but that's my thinking that I've shared with you today, and I've shared it in the hopes that I get more feedback from people about the kinds of things that we need to improve.
Thank you very much indeed. Another gentleman at the back, thank you.
I have a question for Renwick, Professor James. You made a reference in regards to an uncertainty around the occurrence of El Nino. Now, for Pacific Island people whose livelihood is dependent on agriculture and fishing, that's not very comforting. Now, that causes some anxiety and uncertainty and a very dark future, if you like. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Is that just a scientific term in regards to a work in progress that's why you said there's uncertainty around that?
Yes, That's a very good question. So what is happening with El Nino, and what will the future hold, and how will that affect the climate in South Pacific Island nations? These are still some of the big questions that we need to answer. And what the story is that the El Nino cycle has been going on for a very long time, and it will continue to go on into the future, but people are trying to work out, the science community is trying to work out, will the way the ocean temperatures change, will they encourage more El Nino events or less? And will those events be stronger or weaker? And I've been involved with this intergovernmental panel climate change process for 15 years or so now, and the outlook hasn't changed. We still don't know. The different models give us different answers, and it's very sensitive to just exactly how much more the Eastern Pacific warms than the Western Pacific and so on. So I think what the last report said and what is the best advice for the future right now is to assume that the El Nino cycle will continue much as it has done for the past century and more. So I think it's a reasonable thing to say that the El Nino, La Nina cycle will continue in much the same way, but the important message is that the extremes of rainfall that go with that, the massive rainfalls in the places that become wetter and the long dry conditions that occur in the places that do become drier, in El Nino for instance, those conditions are likely to become more intense. So wetter where it's wet, dry where it's dry. So in an El Nino event, that means the western part of the tropical Pacific much more likely to experience drought conditions and water shortages. And the eastern part of the tropical Pacific, right across to South America, much more likely to experience very heavy rainfall and flooding. And vice versa in a La Nina. So that outlook is pretty stark. There will be many years where neither of these things is happening. We have average conditions. And it's not as though every year there'll be some extreme El Nino, but the sorts of variations we've seen over the last, say, 50 years, the outlook is that those variations will get bigger over time. So there are ways of handling that. You need to think about better ways of storing water when there's water around, so that we have more resources when there are dry conditions, and better ways of handling an excess of water. What that means for agriculture, I'm not an expert on that, but I think these things, we hear a lot about sea level rise, and I'm really not trying to downplay that, and we saw the videos. I mean, it's a terrific problem and it's happening right now. But also, we have to think about how water availability is going to shape where we can grow food and what kind of agricultural crops can be produced, and just how secure water and food supplies will be. And the outlook is that those things are going to become less secure than they are now. So this is another major worry, basically.
Thank you very much, James. Greg, thanks.
The secret to getting effective action is to get the community understanding and constructively responding. We've been resisting this for over 40 years. We've been screwing up the environment for over 40 years and been resisting it. What are the issues in engaging the peoples within our church communities and the wider community?
Look, the South Morning me prevents me from telling the church community what they should do. And so that was the reason why I shared basically what I saw and basically what was happening. But I found that some churches do not have a stance, do not have a policy on climate change. And this I got from the G20 Interfaith Conference that was held in Fiji early this year, where not all churches have an official position on climate change. All churches help out when there's a disaster. But I think, there is a real need for getting information out to the next generation. Some churches are working on providing that kind of resources to the young people through Sunday schools and elsewhere. But I get a sense that, there isn't sort of an overarching policy that churches adhere to when it comes to climate change. In Kiribati, I saw that the Unification Church and the Catholic Church were engaged with the family planning group because of the issue of population growth and just not enough facilities, not enough land, not enough housing, not enough, or every resource on South Tarawa is under extreme stress with that population growth. So they seem to be working along those areas.
Yes, thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, may I just add something? I think just coming back to that point about engagement, I mean, I think there are actually lots of individual ways that can happen without having a sort of a grand plan. And I think that the thing to avoid, and maybe the point that you're getting to with the question, the thing to avoid is that you have fine work done by the church and declarations, and then that can be sort of sidelined or marginalised. But I mean, just one example I would give is, I mean, the church is involved in the broad society and the economy. What about some of the major companies we're dealing with? Are they, a simple question to ask, looking further ahead, it's obvious that if we're going to deal with climate change, carbon is going to have to be, it's going to have a price, it's going to be, it's going to end up pretty, there'll be a real risk on carbon if you can't keep using it. So, and you're looking at prices of the order of $100, $200 a tonne, not outlandish. So can we ask the question of companies we're engaged with, what are you doing to factor in climate risk or carbon risk in your accounts? I mean, not many companies are actually doing that. Oil companies are starting to do it. So that's the point of that, is greater awareness of the issue. So I do think that there are lots of quite practical ways that you can actually help that. And this is and just one other point, and we shouldn't consider that the economy is just a fixed thing. If you look at the investment that's going into electricity generation, a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, it just pipped investment going into fossil fuel generation. But apparently in the last 2 to 3 years, it's gone way, way ahead, and you've got coal companies going bankrupt. So there are these sort of dynamic shifts happening, and I think that the point of engagement is maybe to bring greater awareness to people about these sorts of issues, and what better way than going very concretely to go back to my first example, what better way than going in concrete terms back to companies and asking them to explain, well, what are you doing about the climate risk?
Could I just take that question one stage further?
And can you also respond to it, because you've got so much experience?
That's right, you hang on to that, thank you. Which is, many organisations, many people are doing terrifically good work on climate change, and those numbers are building all the time. So what's the incredibly distinct, and so other organisations can comment on social justice, for example, and equity, but what's the really distinctive thing that we people of faith, and all the great faiths of the world, can bring to this? Is it the spiritual dimension? Is it our relationship to God's creation? What is it that we can do very, very distinctively as members of churches to help wider society engage and overcome a sort of sense of helplessness about all this? So what's that very distinctive church way?
Look, I don't know. I don't know. My sense is that some churches are very comfortable advocating for social justice, which includes advocating for climate change. And some churches feel comfortable in standing with trade unions and 350, and others may not feel comfortable that way. Churches have resources which they invest in companies, and I know some groups are now questioning, where are those money being invested to? Is it invested in fossil fuel companies or whatnot? So it's a difficult one that you're asking, and so I think on the basis of what our involvement and our participation of church, it is about loving your fellow man, and it is about making sure that everybody is protected and looked after. I think one of the most powerful things that church groups can do is simply convey that silent but that powerful message to the powers that be. Hey, these policies need to show some kindness and some love to the people out there.
So one of the asks that we have with when we engage with Pacific communities in the islands is that the most important thing that churches have are people. And in the Pacific, those people that are going to these churches, the stories and the impacts of climate change are their stories. Those are their impacts. These are their lived realities. And for us here in New Zealand, and for those in Australia, and for people who are outside of the most vulnerable areas, we have a responsibility as parishioners to, especially parishioners who share churches with Pacific communities, we have a responsibility to highlight, or to use our privilege, and to use our voice to highlight, the climate crisis, or use the privilege that we have to be able to bring light to the issues of climate change. That's what we can do here, and that's what we can do in Australia. And I've said since day one, since I got on board with this, because I've only come into climate work, I've only been involved for 4 years. Until we make climate change as important as Pacific people, until we make climate change as important to us as faith and sport, we don't have a fighting chance to be able to, to help fix this.
Thank you. Sadly, we're going to have to stop for lunch, but I will just make one comment about this. One of the most extraordinary moments last year, in an extraordinary year on climate change, was when Pope Francis addressed a joint session of Congress in September last year. And he, of course, was drawing very heavily on his encyclical, Laudate Si, care of our common home. And wonderfully, this afternoon after lunch, Cardinal John Dew will be engaging us in a group discussion on that. And it is probably the most comprehensive, the most articulate, the most holistic, to use an overused word, which brings faith right to the heart of this, and to our distinctive questions of mission, whether it's around care, creation and social justice, whether it's about challenging economic systems. So that's how we're going to start off the afternoon. And then later on in the afternoon is about what action we can take. So I hope that those two sessions this afternoon will be able to develop for us more of a sense of what that very distinctive thing is we can do as Christians, but what we can do together with all the other great faiths of the world, because care creation is one of the many things that unites us in that. So on that note, a very big thank you to our four very wonderful and knowledgeable and inspiring speakers, and for your questions and your involvement this morning. And I will hand back to, a big hand for these people, please.